Hello and welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its mythology and what it's like to fight in-game as well. In these videos I like to use your suggestions for monsters that you'd like to see, so if there is a monster that you're desperate to see come up, you want to see my interpretation of them visually, or you just want to hear the lore and mythology and inspiration that went into them, make sure to leave that down below in the comments section, because you could be like Alan Kendler, who suggested today's video topic about 3 years ago on my Doppelganger video, and their suggestion for a video topic was the Lamia. So today we're going to be covering Lamias, so let's get started with today's video. In D&D at least, Lamias are conventionally depicted as centaur-like creatures whose upper body resembles a beautiful human, or humanoid creature I guess, but whose lower half is a feline body with 4 paws, as if a humanoid torso has fully grown from the neck of a moderately sized lion or other big predatory cat. In this sense, they tend to have similar silhouettes to sphinxes, and although they're also classed as monstrosities just as sphinxes are, and are competent spellcasters, capable of casting the dreaded Geas spell once per day, and having access to numerous divination and illusion spells, they're not the masters of time and space that sphinxes are. They're only challenge rating 4 creatures, and while their superficial resemblance to sphinxes might catch players off guard, they serve an altogether different purpose when it comes to a Dungeon Master's toolkit. Lamias are despots, tyrants, slave masters, and vain, self-obsessed narcissists who are fanatical about pleasure in all of its forms. They are hedonists and Epicureans, bent on amassing wealth, beauty, adoration, and power. So basically they're just Instagram influencers with cat legs. DMs might overlook Lamias in favour of using a succubus or an incubus, who have an identical challenge rating. But when it comes to tempting your players to devious and wicked acts in the pursuit of a selfish gain of some kind, these 2 creatures actually have fairly different motivations and goals. Whereas an incubus or a succubus might be a useful pawn in some great game, some enormous plot, a creature acting as an agent of some greater force, or perhaps a creature striking out on its own, simply trying to make its way in life, draining the life, soul, and essence of a person who fall for its allure and beauty. A Lamia should be treated a bit more like a gang boss, a low-level mastermind who collects acolytes and servants, who do this creature's bidding in exchange for rewards of gold, power, knowledge, or rewards of the flesh. Succubi and incubi are obstacles to overcome, but Lamias are best used as schemers and perhaps quest givers, creatures that can be bargained with. Lamias have been a part of D&D since its very earliest release, but appeared very differently then. In their first illustrations, they were depicted as a similar humanoid top half, but their centaur-like animalistic abdomens were divided into 2 further sections, with the front legs appearing sort of lion-like, as they do now, but their back legs were seemingly more like scaled goat legs, with cleft hooves and a fluffy tail. Hello there, sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of my patrons over on Patreon for their support this month. Every single one of you, from those who are tipping me the price of a cup of coffee every month, all the way up to those at the very, very highest parts, the highest level backers on Patreon, really tangibly help me to live my dreams and make this content for you. In particular though, I wanted to thank my Silver Archfey patrons and above, who this month are Raptor Dio, Duck Quack, Napin Camo, Jonathan Foster, Yorick Beese, Benjamin Colburn, Dalton Namier, Ethan Dibby, Skyrush Soul, Nathan Stratton, Amanda and Jake Westfall, Ken Doman, Peter Balfe, Ryan H., Tim Kleemer, Steve Harrison, Dan Waterman, Styrax, Colby Monroe, It's Just Avi, or Avi, Brandon Kerr, Sam Hickson, Bork Boulderbender, Darth Keitana, Trevor Traub, Max Schluter, Max Copeland, Tamerling, AJ, Oliver Thorvald Mellock, Dominique Jolly, Aldrin, and Christian Palmer Smith. Thanks to all of these wonderful people, I get to make the videos that you're watching right now, so thank you for taking the time to help me thank them. And if you're interested in joining the community that we have over on Patreon, I'll make sure to leave a link down in my description box that you can use to find us there, where as well as my immense gratitude for your support, patrons receive things like a shout out on all my live streams, this shout out right here, private videos about my homebrew world and lore, and the adventures that I've had in my campaigns that are exclusive to them, copies of every single illustration that I do each month. Every single patron is entered into a raffle each month with the chance to earn a commission of one of their characters, and some of us even have one-on-one chats every single month where we can talk about anything, or I can do some illustration work for you if you're interested in things like commissions. But anyway, I've taken up more than enough of your time. Thank you so much for your patience and for helping me thank these guys, and I'll let you get back to the video. In real-world history and folklore, Lamias stem from ancient Greek and Basque mythology, where stories tell of a very different-looking creature to the D&D interpretation. These alluring siren-like spirits, or monsters, were said to dwell in lakes or near riversides, and typically appeared as beautiful women with a set of duck feet as their only visually distinguishing difference to a normal human. Those Lamias who made their homes by the seashore didn't sell seashells, but instead were said to be more mermaid-like in appearance, with fish tails in place of their legs. At least that's the Basque interpretation. Basque traditions also featured a leprechaun-adjacent element to stories of the Lamia, where it was said that they could always be found at the end of a rainbow, combing their long and luxurious hair. They also believed that when the sun strikes a Lamia's hair, it would then split into a rainbow. So potentially, I guess you could have a limitless chain of Lamias and rainbows with further Lamias at the end of those rainbows. Although Lamias were temptresses or tempters if they were male, the Basque people also saw them as incredibly helpful spirits. If you left food out by the riverside for a Lamia at night, by the following morning they would have magically helped you with some kind of task. Most famously, this might have taken the form of ploughing fields for you, or most likely building bridges from nearby stones that were too heavy to lift, allowing you access to traverse a river where you normally would not be able to. It was said that if a Lamia ever left their riverside home, they would take a keystone with them, making the bridges that they'd built far less structurally sound. These stones were taken by Lamias and would often be used to build massive temple-like tombs called dolems that resembled massive pieces of Stonehenge, and this would become the new home of these weird Mallardy duck ladies. Greek mythology paints a somewhat darker picture of the Lamia, as it pretty much always tends to with its mythological creatures. Lamias in ancient Greece were considered more like the bogeyman, spirits or shades, sharing their name's etymological origin with lemures, fiendish twisted spirit creatures who have also made their way into D&D, but who deserve a video of their own, so I won't go into any more discussion about them for now. As all Greek stories tend to start, the legend of the Lamia revolves around Zeus fancying some beautiful woman, who was typically not his wife, the goddess Hera, but in this case was a queen of Libya, whose name was coincidentally Lamia. As these stories always tend to go, rather than punishing Zeus for his unfaithfulness, or leaving that massively toxic relationship, Hera instead decided to punish Lamia for Zeus's infidelity by forcing her to eat her own human children, which apparently wasn't enough, because she then cursed Lamia and the children that she had with Zeus to be permanently afflicted with insomnia. They would never again sleep a day in their lives, and made them immortal, so they would never again find rest, but constantly need it. Zeus uncharacteristically, for some reason feeling perhaps bad about the absolute devastation wrought upon his mistress that his insatiable libido has caused, decided to grant Lamia some respite from her tiredness by allowing her to remove her own eyes so that she could recover from her sleeplessness somehow. Maybe she couldn't rest her eyes, but she could give them a wash in the sink? I don't know. Way to go, Zeus. The bar is on the bloody ground. In ancient Greek mythology and legend, being without sight has always been associated with having prophetic visions, a trait that has inspired many stories and myths in contemporary media as well, and it is believed that creators like Homer, as in Homer's Odyssey, was blind, for example, and that's why he was able to write the famous stories that he was known for. And before any actuallys come for me in the comments section, I know that Homer may have been several people rather than one, and that the stories were not originally written down, they were passed on through word of mouth. It's just easier to call them or him Homer. Somewhere along the lines, tales of the Lamia became associated with seducers, and Lamia's very sleepy offspring were believed to enchant and seduce people before feeding on their flesh, or kidnapping and eating their children. In the 1st century BCE, Diodorus of Sicily tried to explain or demythologize tales of Lamia, and discovered that there was some sort of rumour originating with this actual real-world character, where it was said that she ordered her soldiers, as queen, to snatch children from their mothers and slaughter them in their hundreds. She was said to be incredibly beautiful, but this terrible act began to transform her and shape her beauty into something gnarled and crooked and beastly. Heraclitus Paradoxographus also gave a rationalizing account, stating that she was simply an incredibly neglectful queen and was a raging alcoholic. In her alcoholic binges, she would ignore her citizens, allowing her citizens to go unpunished and unmoderated in any of their behaviour, leading to riots and horrendous crimes, leading to a folk myth that said that she would remove her eyes when drunk so that she couldn't see the crimes that were befalling her people. In most mythological depictions, Lamias are actually illustrated or described as having serpentine bodies rather than their feline counterparts in Dungeons & Dragons, whereas Diodorus said that she had nothing more than a simply beastly appearance from the crimes that she committed. There were many accounts in the time saying that this beastly appearance was more serpent or perhaps draconic in nature, that she became a beautiful dragoness due to her carelessness or ruthlessness, and this is perhaps the origin of why she was said to have a serpentine body. Ancient history professor and author Daniel Ogden points to Apollonius of Tynia as this Libyan queen, who was called for her callousness and cruelty the Snake Queen, which would seem to be some sort of metaphorical expression, but he insists that this is a literal snake, and this was further expanded upon by Keats in a poem known as Lamia, where it was made popularly clear that Queen Lamia was cursed with the appearance of a snake which she desperately wishes to free herself from so she can return to humanity. A 2nd century account by Antoninus Liberalis, known as the Lamia Sybaris, describes the Lamia as a giant beast, and there's some discrepancy between translations where she is believed to have a, quote, scaly gait, and that she slithers and slides. But some people believe that this is a mistranslation of the word inlabi, which simply means labour or laboured movements rather than a sliding or slithering movement. Although it is specifically mentioned that this creature terrorised Delphi, quote, just as the dragon Python had. There's also a possibility that this creature has simply been mixed up with retellings of several other Greek legends. While I've not made a video about this character, and I'm very desperate to, a lot of you will notice strong similarities to the serpentine Medusa, her plight with Zeus, and subsequent curse from Hera, or Poseidon, depending on which legend you're reading. But also, the Lamia's intrinsic ability to remove its eyes is very similar to the Greek stories of the Graecae, who could also have prophetic visions just as a Lamia might due to their blindness. But with all that speculation aside about what the Lamia might be or might have been, it's important to talk about what Lamias are actually like in D&D. Whereas a Sphinx is the servant of a deity who will protect and obscure artifacts and knowledge of great power and reverence to the gods, Lamias in D&D are said to be servants of the hedonistic demon prince of pleasure and excess, Grazd. As a result, they will often, of their own accord, or through direct instruction of their master, make their homes in the ruins of ancient tombs, forgotten castles, or carcasses of temples which hold great material wealth, and spend their immortal lives influencing those now crumbling structures of long neglected importance with illusionary magics to revitalize their former grandeur. Lamias are obsessed with excess and over-the-top finery in all of its forms. They will amass worshippers and servants as if they were collectible trinkets, quickly growing tired of all but the most markedly gorgeous among them, who they will keep at their side to engage in carnal rituals and tantric displays that would make all but the most experienced succubi blush. Those who do not meet their standard for beauty are sent on ever more convoluted missions to acquire treasure, works of art, enchanting perfumes, fine foods, intoxicating beverages, or any other items that take the Lamia's ever-expanding craving for wealth and beauty. Lamias search with starving longing for these treasures through divination magics that they can cast on great mirrors or pools of water, perfumes or other exotic liquids which pool in their illusory temples to their own self-indulgence. Those servants who fail to return with gifts that the Lamia deems appropriate, or who will offend their senses, meet a grisly end as they become the next item on the Lamia's taster menu of gluttonous depravity. Summed up beautifully in the monster manual, in a passage called Vain Predators, we are told, quote, that Lamias are particularly fond of seeking out adventurers with pure hearts to seduce and corrupt to evil, savouring the destruction of their virtue. They use their magic to lure potential victims to their lairs, relying on illusion and their thralls to capture hapless foes. Lamias prize beauty and strength above all else, however. Any prisoner that falls short of their esteem becomes the main course in a horrible feast, or is set free to die while wandering the wastes. As long as they have slaves to face their enemies, Lamias fight from the fringes, beguiling foes with magic if they can. A Lamia pressed into melee never stays there for long, shredding flesh with a claw and dagger before springing away to safety. Staying on the fringes as spellcasters makes a lot of sense for these guys. It's unlikely that they're going to be dressed in heavy armour where fabulous silks and cloth might look more beautiful, which is why they only have 13 armour class. Their movements are incredibly beautiful and graceful, but not swift as their lion-like bodies would have you believe. Their movement speed is still only 30 feet, so they would prefer to not engage in a confrontation rather than having to escape one. They might use Charm Person, or more likely Mirror Image, to evade damage, falling back on their at-will ability to cast Major Image to perhaps obscure themselves from combat, casting Suggestion on any slaves so as to give herself a more advantageous position rather than facing combat. But if they are forced into combat and are pressed into a corner, they do get a multi-attack, one of which can be a deadly claw attack from this lion-like bottom half, which deals 2d10 plus 3 slashing damage, and can also be a dagger attack, which deals 1d4 plus 3 piercing damage, or far more likely is going to be their intoxicating touch, whether through magic, some sort of injection, or psionic suggestion. They can make a melee spell attack as part of their multi-attack, causing one creature to be cursed for an hour, and until this curse ends, the target has disadvantage on wisdom saving throws and all ability checks, making them drastically more susceptible to her illusions and suggestions. There doesn't seem to be a wisdom saving throw to remove this curse, or an ability to resist it. If she hits you using her charisma, which in this case is a +5 to hit, and beats your armor class, you are simply cursed in this way, allowing her to dominate your mind and feelings, even your field of vision, with whatever she wishes to create. In terms of my visual representation here, as per usual, I wanted to refresh the image of this thing, and seeing as I've already drawn a sphinx, I wanted to use more traditional descriptions of this creature to influence my drawing, so I wanted to give her more of a draconic, serpentine, or fish-like lower half, and other elements of this creature like her claws, her scales, and even her skin tone. But I also wanted to make sure that she could still perform all of these attacks, so I thought perhaps she could grow and manipulate her claws at will, or perhaps have one clawed hand and one caressing hand for use on this cursed touch. I really wanted to make sure that the removable eyes were a feature here. That's not mentioned at all in D&D, but seems to be really intrinsic to what a Lamia is in all of its representations outside of Dungeons & Dragons. So with their seductive, illusory abilities, I thought what might be a nice idea is if she could be two-faced and literally remove this beautiful face to reveal the monstrous face beneath. So I have her holding her mask here that moves just as her face might, literally a fleshy face taking the shape of a mask that has her eyes still inside. I was initially tempted to have her eyes orbiting her or revolving around her, perhaps a blindfold or a bandana, but I thought with a creature that is so obsessed with some mythical idea of beauty that having some creepy eyes floating around might not appeal to her sensibilities, but having a perfect mask that she can just remove at will to reveal her devouring face seemed like something she might enjoy. Libya is an Arabic nation, and with the influence of Lamia's being some ancient Libyan queen, I decided to look up Libyan traditional clothing, and it's absolutely amazing. It's beautiful. There's an enormous amount of jewellery, beads and layers upon layers of very, very fine cloth and silks that I thought would be majestic and beautiful for this creature to wear. They would definitely appeal to her sensibilities. So I wanted to give her a sort of exaggerated, excessive amount of that dangling jewellery in gold, and lots of translucent and patterned fabrics. In terms of the lower half of this creature, like I say, I went for a sort of draconic serpent-like tail, but I thought it might be interesting if Lamias perhaps have different lower halves. Perhaps it depends on where they make their homes, and a feline Lamia might be something that might live in the desert perhaps, or in some jungle temple. Perhaps a camel-like lower half might be better suited on sand dunes. A bear-like lower half might find its way into a thick pine forest, or something more sea-adjacent might look like the one that I've drawn here. But I wanted to pay homage to her roots, and I'm really happy with what I came up with here. And I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember, if you have a creature that you'd like to see me illustrate and discover and explore the lore of as well, make sure to leave that down below in the comments section. And until next time, if you meet a Lamia or just some enchantingly beautiful person who seems to be running their criminal operation out of an ancient temple or illustrious castle, make sure to just prod some of the walls. Don't take anything at face value, and see if you can put your hands through any of these illusory walls, because you might just be dealing with a deadly and greedy, beauty-obsessed Lamia. And until next time, happy monster hunting.